You can't hear me? Hey, Nick.
Oh! Oh my gosh!
No way!
Oh!
No way did that just happen.
Kyle, you're talking to everyone, bud.
Yikes!
What a difference a week makes. The clip you have just heard is of NASCAR Cup Series driver, albeit censored, saying the N-word and being broadcasted on several innocent drivers' live streams. This caught like wildfire last night and has gone very, very much mainstream today. It's certainly a black mark on the sport, and unfortunately it's happening when there's nothing else to talk about. So this is just getting amplified beyond belief. And it's incredible to think that last week we were thinking maybe the tip of the unforeseen consequences of these NASCAR and iRacing esports broadcasts was the potential that a driver could get fired and lose his sponsor, Blue Emu specifically with Bubba Wallace. He didn't get fired from Richard Petty Motorsports, but he did lose a sponsor by rage quitting the race at Bristol for the eNASCAR series. And then you get to the Monza Madness, which ironically enough was also sponsored by Blue Emu. And Kyle Larson drops the N-word. And I mean, that's about as bad. That's about the worst possible thing that could have happened on any of these broadcasts. And just within a week, it has escalated to this point. And I think, there's going to be a lot of changes coming forward for these eNASCAR broadcasts and what drivers can and cannot do, specifically because of this. And it's a real unfortunate deal all around because in a lot of ways, these iRacing broadcasts have given the fans a lot to look forward to. It's given the drivers a lot to look forward to. It's created entertaining content, and it's created some new stars, some drivers that people otherwise wouldn't have looked at, have been streaming, been entertaining, and have been winning these races, and people have been looking at them. And it looks like we might have had too much of a good thing. That was kind of one of the points I made in my last video was this boom was going to have a lot of unintended consequences. It was going to have a lot of things unforeseen that had the potential to happen. And unfortunately, this was one of the things that you could have said, well, you could have joked that this was going to happen. But now that it has happened, we've got to deal with the repercussions of it. And Kyle Larson is definitely dealing with the repercussions of it. Let's read specifically what has happened to Kyle Larson in less than 24 hours after saying the word. So Kyle Larson has been suspended indefinitely from NASCAR, and he must attend sensitivity training. Chip Ganassi Racing, who he drives for in real life, has suspended him without pay. Credit One has disavowed Kyle Larson's statements. They are one of the primary sponsors of his race car. Another sponsor of his, iRacing, a personal sponsor, sponsored him in the Chili Bowl, has suspended him and banned him from the game. Chevrolet has suspended their relationship with Kyle Larson, and at the moment, there has still been a couple sponsors, namely McDonald's is the major one. I think people are still waiting for a statement, but at the time of recording, they have not put out any kind of public statement. Now, before I go on, I'm going to play the 42-second clip that was posted this morning by Kyle Larson himself, apologizing for dropping the N-bomb last night. I would like you to hear his words and make up your own mind at whether or not his response was genuine.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm sorry. Last night I made a mistake and said the word that should never, ever be said. And there's no excuse for that. I wasn't raised that way. It's just an awful thing to say. And I feel very sorry for my family, my friends, my partners, the NASCAR community, and especially the African-American community. I understand the damage is probably unrepairable, and, I own up to that. But I just wanted to let you all know how sorry I am. And, I hope everybody is staying safe during these crazy times. Thank you.
Now, obviously, people are going to be always skeptical of an apology. And I think certainly the way he used the word, especially in the context of it was something that he didn't think he was being recorded, and that to me is the biggest red flag in all of this, that he said it when he didn't think he was being recorded. I mean, it wouldn't have made it any better if he just dropped it as a swear word, because he got wrecked or something. It's especially bad when he thought no one was listening and everybody was, and that's what he said. That being said, I do want to say this, is that statement you just saw did not sound very scripted to me, and it sounded very genuine from the heart. Look, I'm not about canceling people. I think that is the wrong way to approach these kind of situations. I think it's important for the people to learn, improve, and reintegrate themselves into society. And that's what I want to see for Kyle Larson straight up right off the bat. I want to see him realize his mistake, and I think he is, no doubt about it, learn from it, and improve. I think that is the most important thing. For context purposes, I also need to say that a lot of people are watching these streams from the drivers, and I played the Connor Daly one at the beginning of this video. I want to make darn sure that the people who were unintentionally streaming this word are not caught up in it. There's a difference between the driver chat and these Discord or TeamSpeak chats that the drivers are in personally when they're streaming. A lot of times the drivers, and in fact I've done this myself, especially with pro drivers, as you've probably seen the last couple of weeks with streams. We all get in a Discord, we all get in a TeamSpeak, and we speak independently with each other that is not affiliated whatsoever with iRacing. Now, personally, when I'm streaming iRacing, I have the game chat turned off. So I can't hear what the other drivers are saying to me in the game, specifically for this reason. If somebody drops an N-word, then unfortunately, in some ways, I'm liable for that. Even if I had nothing to do with it, I disavow it, obviously. It doesn't matter. If the word has been said, the yellow $ at worst, demonetized. So these drivers, they obviously, in some ways, especially when you get into the really professionally done races that are being on TV, they need to not only communicate with the other drivers, they need to communicate with race control. And race control goes out on these channels, so they need to keep all these channels open and active. The downside of this is if somebody doesn't know they're on and somebody says something like Kyle Larson says, the drivers all ended up streaming it, and they all potentially could get in trouble. And that's what sucks about this so much. So I've transcribed specifically what was said in the driver chat, eliminating everything else that was said on the various streams, so you know exactly what context Kyle Larson said this word in. Larson, you don't hear me at all? I can see it. You can't hear me? Hey, N-bomb with a hard R. Aaron McKern. Wow. Larson, hey. Anthony Alfredo. Kyle, you're talking to everyone, bud. McKern, yeah, we heard that. Connor Daly, yikes. Unfortunately, things like this often don't just punish the person who said the word. There's often a lot of collateral damage, especially when you get mainstream outlets involved in talking about this story. I think there are about to be major changes coming for these iRacing broadcasts, these driver iRacing streams. Personally, I very much think that we are going to see a complete change of how much freedom the drivers are given with streaming. Again, I want to be wrong about this, but I just don't think I am. I think the drivers are probably going to be restricted by their sponsors. I mean, pretending like the sponsors do not see what is happening right now, the bad PR that stuff like Credit One, Chevrolet, iRacing, McDonald's are all getting right now, they don't want to be next. So they are probably going to crack down very hard. The series are probably going to crack down very hard. In fact, we saw this before this incident happened in IndyCar. They were shutting the driver chat down so the drivers couldn't talk to each other during the race, specifically for issues like this. And I guess in hindsight, it was a very smart decision. And I just wonder, what is going to happen with these iRacing broadcasts? Because this is the big thing too. Is one of the things I was talking about was the massive influx of all these Cup guys in here prior to this, prior to them starting to bring some seriously bad PR to esports mainstream. In a lot of ways, this is how esports people are, the mainstream folks are now seeing esports. I mean, this is really, really bad for esports. Yeah, but you look at it and you look at some of the great marketing opportunities that were there for iRacing, were there for the drivers, were there for NASCAR. I think a lot of those things where you see the personality of the drivers, I think those are going to start being pulled back, which is a major shame because you're going to see drivers who gain a lot of, or were possibly going to gain a lot of popularity through this, being stifled and restricted just like real life. Again, we kind of go back to that whole point I made in the last video. Are we starting to take this too seriously, especially when talking about the pro drivers in real life, not the pro drivers in esports? And that's the big problem here too, because again, I'm sure the esports guys, the guys who are professionally paid to race iRacing, especially when the pandemic is over, they are really getting boned here. I mean, this is something where you might go to a sponsor trying to find an esports sponsor, and the first thing they are going to hear about this is one of two things, and neither of them are good. It's going to be, well, what happens if you rage quit like Bubba Wallace, or what happens if you say the N-word like Kyle Larson? This is going to change things, and again, I mean, it was like, I don't want to. I did see this coming to a certain extent. I didn't see it coming to this extent, but I always kind of figured that this was probably not going to end well, and it certainly doesn't look like it's ended well. I mean, within 2 weeks, you've had obviously this situation where a driver has been suspended without pay. All of his sponsors have disavowed him. We don't know what his future is going to be. I would imagine that he will eventually get back to racing. Will he get back to the Cup Series? Who knows? But I do think he will get back because I personally, again, I want to have faith in people. I want to think that people are inherently good. Obviously, I know that's usually not the case. I hope Kyle Larson will learn from this. I hope he will get back and just learn from his mistakes. But you also have, and this is the crazy thing too, is that when this was broadcast on the NASCAR.com page, the sponsor of this whole Monza Madness was Blue Emu. And it's really a bad look for the sport when the sponsor that fired the one black driver in the sport is sponsoring the event that another driver drops a racial epithet in. That's just... it's not like it was planned, and I'm not trying to imply anything about Blue Emu in any way. This is a happy accident or a not so happy accident that it happened this way. But the whole thing is just a nightmare right now. It is a PR nightmare. And that's the other problem, is that there's nothing else to talk about right now. This is the one sports story that anybody, whether they're a mainstream source, a sports source, or just a general auto racing source, that's all they're talking about. And it's all they're going to be talking about for weeks on end because there's nothing else coming down the pipeline unless suddenly we just reopen everything else up and real racing comes back. This is a nightmare, man. This is worst case scenario in a lot of ways. And I'm happy that in a lot of ways I don't have to be the one that has to deal with this, because the fallout is going to be enormous and we're already beginning to see it. I hope everybody's able to recover from this. Again, my thought is that, man, Kyle Larson, so disappointed in the guy, because I was a supporter of him, and I definitely liked what he did on track. I can't endorse this one bit, and you can't even use the context argument here because the context is just awful. So it's not a good look. It's not a good look. The whole deal. I'm worried about it. Yeah, it's not good. I think the important thing is that Kyle personally learns from this. I hope he does, because, yeah, that's not a good thing to be saying. So, what do you think? What do you think the future of esports is? Do you think this is the worst that it will get, or do you think more people will step in it lose sponsors? Do you think that a lot of the fun things that we were doing with esports are going to go away now in this particular realm of the sport because of these comments and some of the real world repercussions that have happened? Let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video.